Mic's on. That's appropriate. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. The time is now 6:30 p.m. and we will call this meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call, please.
Mayor Lockman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hawk.
Here.
Trustee Calhoun. Here. Trustee Doherty.
Here.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Here.
Trustee Morris. Here.
Present.
And everyone is present, and I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with the following changes. Discussion items, we're going to move item 7C to A, and under action items, we're going to add a discussion on the Fall Festival.
I'll second.
In a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The agenda is approved with those changes. Next item is audience business, and I don't believe we had any general audience business tonight, so I will move on to the consent agenda. For the benefit of the audience, the items on our consent agenda tonight are the payment approval report in the amount of $407,608.34 and the July 16th, 2019 minutes. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Yes. Trustee Calhoun.
Yes.
Trustee Grant, or Doherty.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Hawk.
Aye.
Trustee Strong.
Yes.
Mayor Lockman.
Yes.
Oh, Trustee Morris. Sorry, thanks.
Motion carries 7-0. The consent agenda is approved. Next items on the agenda are the discussion items, and we will move to discussion item A, the skate park. I believe we have someone from the audience that wants to come forward and speak. So if you want to come up here to the podium, make sure the mic is on, state your name and address, and then let us know what you would like to share. Name and address? I don't know if it's on, Linda. 1 second.
Okay, try.
There you go.
Cody Anderson, 683 Meadowlark Lane, in Lockwood, Colorado, obviously.
You had emailed me about the skate park, so we're discussing tonight what we should do about it in the future, and I was curious of your thoughts.
We're kind of tag teaming this. I'm Kara Anderson at 321 Feather Place, also in Lockwood. Cody's my son. He is a 12-year-old, very active gentleman, and the skate park is a source of frustration for him because he is an avid skateboarder, and the equipment at the skate park does not give him the opportunity to really utilize it. What's there is some railing that is kind of for more advanced skateboarders, and that would not keep him entertained for very long. And the other equipment that is there appears to have kind of a lip on it that would damage his skateboard if he used it. So, and him. And so what we've been doing is packing up and going to skate parks that are out of the town. And so speaking on his behalf, from his perspective, it's frustrating because, you know, he has to wait for someone to be available to drive him to go exercise and get fresh air. And from my perspective, it's frustrating because of that. Plus, looking at the broader view, the younger teens and those who are not of driving age yet don't really have anywhere to be active in this town. So it's not just a, please look at the skate park because my kid wants to use it. I'm looking at the whole town, and we have a lot of non-driving teenagers with a lot of energy and nowhere to go, which could lead to a lot of mischief. So I have looked at the Tony Hawk Foundation website, and there are some grants and so forth that can be applied for through there, depending on what the legal side of it is and what the town would qualify for. So we're willing to be part of the solution instead of just saying, please fix it. We want to help. So we're here to ask if there's any way possible for the town to consider expanding the facilities that are there and allow us to participate in finding solutions and donations or write grants or whatever it is that we can legally do to make something happen for the community.
Ask one quick question. What parks do you go to now since ours isn't functional?
Go to the Brian Aragon skate park.
Thank you.
Only because that's the closest. On weekends, we do travel because that is, you know, if you go there often enough, it's not as, it's very, very busy, first of all. So it also can be kind of limiting. It's also not, it's not huge. It's not. So we change it up and we do travel around. There's one in Milliken that he really likes. There's one in Denver that is ridiculously huge and has everything you could ever ask for. And it's more beginner friendly as well. And there's one in Thornton that we go to also.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
No, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. And if there's anything we can do, please advise. And we'll be more than happy to make phone calls, write letters, do whatever we need to do to.
Thank you. We will have our board discussion now, and thank you for your time. So I believe staff included in our packet a picture of the skate park design that we had discussed several months ago. I'm just kind of opening the floor for discussion about what we want to do with that park going forward into the future, how much we want to emphasize the staff to look at it for this upcoming year's budget. And any questions you might have for Steve that he can direct to Director Bebeck. So is there anyone interested in speaking? Trustee Doherty.
Yeah, I actually have a question for the speakers. Do you guys know of other people in town? Like, so, do you have other friends and things like that that are also skateboarders in town that would be utilizing this facility if we were to improve it, or?
Yeah, couple other scooters in the neighborhood and a few skateboarders that could use it.
Thank you.
Trustee Pennerman?
Malfunction, but anyhow, when I was looking at this, I was a little confused because the headline on it says skateboard park, but then when I looked at all the drawings and renderings of what have been submitted, it looks like it's more of a multi-use park than just a skateboard park. So what I'm wondering is, are we gonna try to make this a multi-use park, or are we gonna concentrate more on this being a skateboard park? Because if it's gonna be a multi-use park, and the renderings that they've designed, there's very little skateboard structure inside of these drawings. So I'm wondering if we're considering this to be a full blown-out skateboard park and we want to move towards that, or this is gonna be a multi-use park with minimal skateboard structure in it. I wasn't here when this was discussed before, so I'm just trying to get some clarification.
Yeah, and I think that's the discussion. What do we want to do with it? The designs that were included in the packets, this was before you got on the board. Do you put those together for us as a concept, something we could do? And I think the initial reactions from this board were that would be beautiful and wonderful, but way too expensive. So that might be a dream. But what do we realistically want to do is kind of the conversation for now.
Well, having 2 or 3 grandchildren is pretty bad. some of the larger, nicer skateboard parks, like in Thornton and North Glen and around the area. And I think if we're going to consider this to be a skateboard park, we ought to move towards that, make it totally a skateboard park, and do it the right way, make it a nice skateboard park, and make it as inclusive and as large as we can. That's my view on this.
What level of priority would you put on that kind of project? Sort of what we're looking for, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the budget discussions early next month. Is this a priority? Is this something we want to invest heavily in tomorrow? Is this something we're looking at investing in a couple years? That kind of thing.
Well, I'd like to see it get done right away. I mean, as soon as we can do it. Otherwise, these skateboarders are going to be adults and have their own children by the time we get it done.
Yes?
I think that's my take on it.
Well, obviously, I'm an advocate for things for kids, right? Like, it's impossible to separate my career from that. I know of a lot of kids at the middle school that would be very interested in having like any sort of other park feature. I would just like to say, like, here we have a community member and a son that are very willing to help look for some grant opportunities. I would also encourage us to potentially look at a Get Outdoors Colorado grant. I think we're in a prime place to pursue something like that. And I also was not on the board when this was first discussed, but I like the idea of having a variety of things for families, because there could be some Loch Buoy families that do drive to the facility, and multiple kids that have multiple interests. You could find something that everybody would like to do. So I personally would like to see us maybe tap into some volunteers that are willing to help look for grant opportunities and see if we can get some grants.
How big a priority do you see this as? Relative to the other things we need to work on?
One of the things I spoke about when running for this position was that I think we need more options for our kids in Loch Buoy. Like, a library is important to me, but recreation and physical activity is super important to me. Like, I physically am a product of somebody who didn't have physical activity like readily available to me when I was growing up, and I don't wish that on any kid whatsoever. So I want to see opportunities for them to get outside.
Thank you. First, I would like to second Trustee Jeffers' emphasis and urgency on amenities and features for kids and families in the community. I think I'd also like to mention that in our comprehensive plan, there's pretty strong emphasis on facilities and features for families, walkability, activities and such. I would place a high priority on the skate park business, coupled also with our thoughts, plans, and ideas for a better trail system and so forth. I'd like to make a quick personal comment to Cody and his family that I'm your guys' neighbor. I'm across the street in the perpetual construction yard that's still dirt. I'm your neighbor. Anyway, I knew you were familiar. Sorry for the distraction, but I regret not recognizing you at the beginning of the meeting. My apologies. My boys should be playing with your boys. Let's do that. Thank you for the quick distraction. I love either of the design concepts that we came up with, or that the group came up with. Either one of those or a modification would be really awesome for our town. One of my concerns with this is just the location of that skate park. I think that location is a little bit limiting. As designed, parking for it would be accessed off of Zante, that remote residential street, and the parking would be a little bit limited there. I'm wondering if we could perhaps find another better location in town. And then also from the packet, if we look at the page with the network analysis about how close it is or the accessibility, it really only serves about half of Lockwood Farms. I mean, it doesn't serve it, but it's within walking distance to half of Lockwood Farms. And while that's a convenient place to put it, I don't feel that it serves our town the best in terms of location. And I don't know what other properties would be available that we could explore, but I'd like to at least open up looking for other properties or other parcels that we could put it. I don't know if somewhere along the power lines would work, but if we could find a location that better serves a larger chunk of our town, that would be ideal. But in terms of priority, I'd like to keep this towards the top of our list of projects, especially if we can do it. And then final comment is, could we conduct an informal or even a formal survey of our town, either by Nextdoor or on social media or with the newsletter, but conduct a survey and have the town weigh in on what their priorities are. Throw in there the skate park or other parks or trail system or other things, and just try to pull a broader slice of what people think. And that's all I had.
Trustee Stratt?
Well, I just agree with everybody tonight, so. I think it's a great idea to try to integrate maybe some other play features with the skate park. If that's possible, I think it's a great idea to maybe do some research into the location. Maybe there's a central location that's better. I would ask Cody to maybe draw up a little sketch of what he would like to see in that park. That's a good place to start for us, because we really don't have a drawing to start with, so that would be helpful. But other than that, and I would place a high priority on it. I mean, the kids have nothing. As soon as we cut that trench across the park, Lockwood Park, they couldn't even play football anymore, and we haven't fixed it. So anything for the kids to do would be high priority.
I think this would be a good idea. I definitely think doing kind of a mixed-use park, not purely focused on skate, but I think that would be a good thing to have. But then also having a playground, probably having a basketball hoop as well. But one other thing that I think we should be aware of is we currently delegate maintenance on a lot of our parks to HOAs because we don't have the staffing, we don't have the ability to maintain what we as a town already own and basically have to maintain, and then we're shelling that off to others. So now we're wanting to add another park that I'm guessing we're not going to grow our staff to maintain this one. So is this just going to end up in disrepair like our others would if the HOA wasn't involved? So I think we should have a maintenance plan in place if we were to look at something like this at all. Because, we could spend a lot of money up front and in 5 years it's in disrepair, and all we really did was offer it for a couple of years, which is great, but I think in the long term, we would have wasted taxpayer money, and I think that's short-sighted. As for a priority, I think this is kind of a medium priority. There's a lot of things that we've looked at from a town's perspective. I think we've got a lot of feedback about a trail system through town, and we've already kind of started to put some of those things in motion, as well as I think setting aside some money from some grants for those projects. But I think that priority can kind of change a little bit based on, if we go out and we are able to market this and get a decent amount of grants and things like that to make this happen, I think that we could definitely make this happen. But there's definitely other things that are out there. We have, you know, the park at the water tower that's coming up in our near term. You know, so I guess if I'm really weighing this, first off, I don't recall off the top of my head right now every project that the town's considering. There's a lot of them. So to say that this is the highest priority out of all of those, when we know that there's going to be a water tank going in over in Silver Peaks, so we could not address that and have just a dirt patch, or we need to plan that. And how does that plan into our priorities? The trailway system, how does that plan into the priorities? Not to diminish this at all, but I think we really need to understand that. And again, if we can go out and get a decent amount of funding to make this happen, I think we can definitely move that up. I'm a little curious on the parking. It looks a little small. I'm curious, so I definitely understand having this off of Zante Way. But I'm curious on if there's any way to bring this off of County Road 37, or if that's, you know, we're trying to limit some of the access off of 37 for kind of a long-term planning for that. Although, based on Zante, though, doing it that way, you're pushing a lot of potential traffic through a residential neighborhood that road's probably not designed for, would be my guess. I also think we should look at scaling it down a little bit. I think we have a lot of lawn area in this particular park, and I think there's a lot of things.
Design or in the existing?
What's that?
Design or the existing?
In the design. You know, because we really talked about how the designs that we got were pretty expensive. I think cutting out the splash pad would save a lot of cost, honestly. You know, even scaling it down from how much lawn area that we have, that's then, you know, we have to mow, we have to water, all of those things. So trying to scale it back a little bit from that standpoint, because, you know, having that for a walking would be good. But maybe actually doing a loop like around the main park, so parents can do, you know, walks around kind of the central area where the kids are playing. Because like in the design, I think it just has a couple of like crossing paths. So doing something that allows it to scale down a little bit, at least from like the non-park central core, to try to save a little bit on cost. And that's all that I have.
Trustee Ott?
A year or so ago, there was a presentation on one of the upstate Colorado meetings I attended about Milliken built a skate park. They used a lot of GOCO funds, and they got a lot of private donations. So I would say maybe have our David, Mr. Beback, talk to the people in Milliken and see exactly how they did that, because they built a dynamite skate park for not too much public money. You know, a lot of private and a lot of grants. And I think it would behoove us if we can keep it a priority, especially if we can get more money from other individuals instead of the town. And I think I'd like to see Mr. David talk to the Milliken Park and Recs people and see how they did it, because I know they built a dynamite skate park with not a lot of public money.
Trustee Strack?
There's one illustration that we have, I'm sorry,
No, that's okay. I just missed it.
that we have, just kind of shows just like a little curve right in here. And then when I look at the construction costs for that concrete wall, it's like $6,000. So I'm sure it would cost more than that, but my thought is, couldn't we just do a temporary, for $6,000 or $8,000, put in a wall that they could curve up on and leave one or two of the existing things? And for now, that would at least give them a place to play while we try to decide what's best for us.
Trustee Counterman?
Well, as far as the maintenance goes, that was a concern of mine when I was looking at these plans. But as we all know, a skate park is mostly made out of cement. And I think once you get the skate park done and it's all cement, I don't think there's going to be as much maintenance and upkeep to it as if you had a full-blown out multi-use park with grass and trees and a water thing that you need to take care of and all those sort of things. So I would like to see the priority be on
building a bigger, better skate park itself. And the other thing that I'm confused about is when I look at these diagrams, they have a very small section dedicated to this whole project and nothing on the other side of the drainage pan. And we have this whole huge area that's not included in the park itself. And I'm wondering if we couldn't use more of the area and maybe do the skate park where they have the small designated area for a park. And then on the other side of the drainage ditch, build like a picnic pavilion or something like that and really get some use. If we're gonna do this, I think we should do it right and get some multi-use out of it. And as far as the money's concerned, I think we ought to go to United Power and tell them to give us a nice big chunk of money, and we'll name this the United Power Skate Park. So I think we need to go to them and talk to them. They've been very generous in the past in donating to different causes, and I don't see why we can't approach them and talk to them about this.
And the sub-power plant's right there too, so.
Yeah, well, they have a power plant right there on the corner, so maybe they could do something to help us out with that. And dress their power plant up and give us a few $100,000 to help do this.
Jordy?
One thing I did forget to mention as well is the use of this location. I actually think this is a really good location for it, because I think kind of long-term planning, it is more centralized for where the town's going to be. The other thing too is if you kind of look at where everything's currently at, I don't believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any public or I guess town parks in LGI. I think those are all HOA parks. So we aren't really having any parks, but then if you go and look at the parks that we have in Old Town and the parks that we have in Berkshire, those are town parks. So we already have parks. Now, we can discuss if those are usable parks. I mean, there's definitely things there for kids to do. Maybe not kids of his age, but there are parks in those areas. And so I actually like this because I think it really starts to tie in kind of the northern part of town and where the town's going to be developing over in the future to really kind of tie things together. Because right now, I actually think there's a pretty big gap of County Road 4 that kind of separates, the main part of the town of Lochbuie and kind of this spur off to the north that's still the town of Lochbuie, but really isn't tied or really connected to the rest of the town. And I think this would be a good spot to kind of help bridge that.
As I'm processing everyone's thoughts, I think I go back to what I said the first time we discussed this, which is that's a really bizarre location to invest a lot of money because there's not a lot of great ways to get there that aren't through a very rural neighborhood. So I think Trustee Morris's comments actually sparked me thinking, yeah, we do need a better skate park in town. If there are a lot of kids using it, which it sounds like there are, or at least enough to warrant an investment, but maybe that's not the best location for it. As we're talking about what to do with Lake Henry going forward, maybe that's a good place for this as part of a larger park there. And in the meantime, we do some kind of temporary structures that Trustee Strock suggested at that location to work until we can do something bigger and better at Lake Henry or somewhere else in town that makes a little more sense and is more traffic friendly. Yeah, you okay over there? So that was my concern about that, is I just keep going back to investing $100,000 or more in a nice park in a part of town that is meant to be rural, and driving traffic to that spot probably doesn't make a ton of sense for our long-term community planning. And I think that's something we need to consider as we talk about this more at budget time, is what we do long-term. Trustee Gunnerman?
Well, I agree with Trustee Dougherty's assessment on spreading the wealth around. I think that we do need something in that area, and that area is going to be more centralized and in an area that isn't out by Silver Peaks or somewhere like that. I think I would like to see something. And as far as the parking goes, it's a half a block off of 37. You take a right turn and you go down one block and you're there. So if you have parking at the park, and looking at these diagrams, I don't think it would be that much of a hassle. It's not that far off of the road. I mean, you're not going to be able to park on 37 or 4. It's just not realistic. But I think that if you put a small parking place in there as it's designed in these diagrams, I think it would work out all right. And like I said, it's not that far off. And I think the central location that location is a good location to start to show that we're looking at different areas of the town to develop.
I'll just follow up on that. I wasn't suggesting we abandon that area. I just don't know if it's a good spot for a skate park. Kind of what I would perceive there would be more like a neighborhood pocket park, a basketball court, a picnic pavilion, and then put the skate park somewhere where it can be bigger and better and more frequently used by everyone. And my concern wasn't that people wouldn't go there. My concern was people move to the farms because they like the rural and the low traffic. And if we build a big fancy park there and drive traffic into that neighborhood, I think there's going to be some upset people. And maybe I'm wrong. You live there and Dave lives there, but that's the perception I have of that neighborhood. But I think, and I'm willing to continue this conversation for a few more minutes, but we are going to have a much deeper conversation about this at budget time. So, Trustee Connerman.
Well, there's already a fence on the south side of this park, a 6-foot privacy fence, and I know that the Bowens would not be objective to this. So all we're talking about really is building some kind of barrier between this and the house that sits on the west side of the park. So I don't think it's going to be opposed. In fact, I think it'll really be happily accepted by the people that live in the farms, because there's going to be something. There's families in the farms that have children. A lot of kids live in there, actually. And especially recently, there's been kids of this age that have moved in there that I see walking around doing nothing. So I don't think it's going to be that much opposed, and you can always take a census of the people that live in the farms and see if they'd be opposed to that, but I really don't think that's going to happen.
I was just gonna say, like, we obviously need to have more conversation about it. I agree with getting input of the community. I agree with considering where the location might be best suited for such a place. But in the meantime, it sounds like there are some things there that need to be repaired so that they're not dangerous or damaging. And I would say we need to make haste on correcting that issue.
Okay, well, seeing no further discussion tonight, I think we'll leave it there. I have told Steve and Director Beback that we should talk about this in more detail when we get to budget time. And I will talk about in my comments when our board retreat is and all that. So in the meantime, in those next couple weeks before we have our retreat, talk to your neighbors, talk to the people on the farms particularly. If you can get some more kids to email me and say, get something done at that park, that's awesome. So that we have something in our hands when we go to have those discussions in a couple weeks. Okay, next item on the agenda is draft resolution number 2019-11 to approve the appropriation of water for the Fulton Ditch Shares. Mr. Jeffers, I'm assuming. We're having mic issues.
I'm usually loud enough. So, the reason for this resolution is we recently closed on the Loch Louis Center Water Resource Credit Agreement. The town acquired shares in Fulton Ditch Company, and as a condition of that agreement, we need to file a water board application. So we filed that application at the end of last month. As part of that application, there was a change of the water right to municipal use, so you can use it in your system. Because of the way that the water historical use, we need to do an exchange on the river to get it up to United Diversion Structure to kind of bring it over into your system. We have a augmentation plan, which is really just so that we could include some additional sources of replacement water. The water that we're using typically to replace the historic irrigation return flows from the farms is the water itself. But that's only available in the summer unless we store it and release it in the winter. We wanted to create more flexibility for the town. We have Bell Mountain water, we have other water storage. So it was just for flexibility. Then there's also a recent water board issue that's come up in a lot of cases. You've been able a lot of times to not have to delineating the town administrator's authority in water storage. Even though we didn't get this done before we filed the application, I thought it was appropriate at this point to come back and ask you to adopt a resolution. Not tonight, we're just going to discuss it. But to adopt a resolution ratifying the filing of the application, reaffirming the town's intent to appropriate the water for an exchange and also to appropriate the return flows. I gave you two maps earlier. This is just to illustrate a little bit about how this works. If you look at Exhibit A, it's a little hard because the coloration is a little bit light, but at the bottom of the map, just above where it says Exhibit A, it shows the Fulton Ditch head gate. And then there's some yellow squares in there, so certificate number 411.8 shares, 25 shares. A little further down, there's another certificate of 20 shares, and further down, there's another certificate of 20 shares, and then finally towards the top of the page, another certificate. So the water rights that you obtained came from all these farms. And for us to deliver the water back to the river and use it, the Fulton Ditch is actually, at times it goes into 3 sections because there's not enough water to go around. Sometimes they're running the water to everybody. At other times of the year, it'll only go to section 1 or section 2 in the middle or section 3 at the end. And so the ditch company has a provision that says you have to use an augmentation station from the same section where your farm is located. So we're going to have to get, in this matter, we're going to have 3 different aug stations, although it's a possibility of putting one right on the line of 2 and 3 if United ever builds it. But in the end, if you look at the next map drawn in red, at the top of the page, it says the exchange from Point, the Fort Lupton Aug Station. Our intention still is to work with Fort Lupton to purchase rights in the augmentation station. That is the furthest down the ditch, and so it would be delivering water back to the river at the furthest downstream location. And we might have og stations along the way delivering water also. But that would be the furthest location that we would have to exchange back up. On this map, there's a star. Exchange 2 point is diversion number 3. So the exchange operates from there. We basically dump, let's say, a CFS of water at that lower point. We take a CFS of water at the upper point when it doesn't hurt anybody, and that's considered an appropriation. So one of the claims in the application is an appropriation for that exchange. The other appropriation is that we would run the water down, including the consumptive use portion you get to keep and use, and the return flow that you normally leave in the river. But because there may be days when you don't have to leave it in the river and you can take it, we've included a claim for an appropriation of those return flows on those days in those circumstances when we don't think it injures anybody. So that's a second claim for an appropriation. So the purpose of the resolution is primarily to state your intention or reaffirm your intention that you wanted to appropriate water for that exchange and for those return flows. I included other language about just ratifying that we did it, that you approved the filing of the application, you reaffirmed that you want all of us to proceed in water court to obtain a decree. That's the sort of stuff we normally put in a resolution before we file. But I think you can also simply reaffirm what we've done. The reason we filed the application without coming to you to begin with is you had already approved the water resource credit agreement, which included the obligation to file the application. So we felt we already had authority to do it, but it wasn't specific on these 2 appropriations. The exchange was pretty much implicit in that, the only way we can get the water. So we just thought we would put this in the file, if you would, if you approve this at your next board meeting, so that we have this and can show it in water court as affirming it. I think Steve did what he told me to do. But this is just more evidence of that intent on behalf of the town. So anyways, I would welcome any questions and would hope that at the next meeting you would approve that resolution. I do have some minor changes to it that I would propose. In paragraph 1, I was not specific enough about appropriating water for the exchange, so I would change that paragraph to make that more explicit. And that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just affirming, go for it. I mean, anytime you can assert your water rights in Colorado, you need to go for it. So my vote is have at it.
Anyone else?
So we're not doing the resolution tonight? We're going to put it off till next meeting? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, it wasn't on the agenda tonight for action, and after I looked at it, it needs a little bit of changes so I can bring it back to you.
Yeah, just maybe a question for town administrator. Does Mr. Stamey have any objections or concerns to share with us as to either form or function or substance of this? No. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, that was an easy one. The next one is you too.
Okay, the next one is the proposed amended water resource credit agreement for Silver Peaks East. As you may remember, when we were here the last time, we discussed the request that the town consider amending the agreement to allow for a 2-phased development because of some high water issues in the subdivision. The developer was losing a large number of lots. The developer had a builder they thought was going to work with them at the time, and through those discussions, it appeared that the best way to handle this from their perspective was to divide or treat the subdivision in 2 phases. One is to the west of the Spear Canal, where there are not these kinds of problems, and so the development can proceed under the current plat. And so we already know the number of lots that have been approved over there and the amount of irrigated acreage over there. And so we can determine how many SFEs and water certificates associated with that and water dedication. The original plan for the whole subdivision was for a total of 222 certificates, or SFEs, and that was for 191 residential lots, and the rest of that was landscaping. They now anticipate losing 37 lots. As we mentioned to you at the last board meeting, it wasn't the last board meeting, it was the last one I was at. We discussed their request that they be able to dedicate the same amount of water as they were planning and to pay the same amount of fees they were planning. And then they would have an extra 37 certificates, even though they were losing the lots. They would pay you for that, get those certificates, turn around and sell those to for use over in Silver Peaks. Excuse me, not Silver Peaks, in Blue Lake. And I believe Michael is here tonight. They have an agreement with the developer over there to purchase those 37 certificates if you approve an agreement that allows the sale. So the idea for this proposal is that in the first phase, the developer would close by providing the town with all of the water rights necessary for the full subdivision. There would be a lien on a portion of the water rights that would be used in the second phase, but the water rights necessary for the first phase would be dedicated to you outright. That would be enough water, and they would pay enough fees. It's basically 60% of the water, 60% of the fees. They would get 134 certificates. That would be enough for 75 lots, plus associated landscaping, which I think is another 22 SFE, and then 37 SFEs for the certificates to be sold for use at Blue Lake, okay? So we've changed this, and I provided you both a red line and a clean. Some people hate red line. Some people want to see every little change. So I gave you both, so you'd have an opportunity to look at those. Instead of having one closing, now there would be, we're proposing 2 closings. The first one could happen relatively quickly once the agreement is signed. There's 35 days by which they have to give me some documents that we need for closing to prepare for closing. And then we could hold that first closing. They could turn around and sell those certificates, the 37 certificates, solely for that one user. And the rest of the certificates on that phase they couldn't use for 6 months. We have to file in water court, which we would do in 90 days. And that gives us a little bit of leeway for getting the water court case underway. There's a way for them to be able to use those certificates quicker by paying us some additional money to be used for leasing water and other things. Frankly, they're not going to be building so fast. I don't think that they would need the certificates quicker than 6 months, but they would have that option. The second phase wouldn't occur until, and I'm not sure it's in the agreement, really wouldn't occur until the third amended plat was approved. So they're working on replatting the east side of the canal because they've lost a bunch of lots. They need to take those lots away. They've had to change a few roads. They may or may not have moved the location of some other things. And so they're in the process of doing that. And I know we were giving a round of comments today on the plat, on the proposal. So the concept is that they would have time to be able to work that through. They would then set a closing once that's done and once they're ready to close and ready to provide us with the documents and pay the fees that are required. We could set that closing. There's an outside deadline of 1 year from the date of the first closing, if I remember right. So we have an outside deadline on that. They can go quicker if they get the approval that they need. If the plat approval comes back with a different number of lots or a different amount of landscaping water requirements, we've tried to build in some terms here that we can then adjust. Hopefully they stay within they have to stay within the water dedication amount. So if they get more lots, they're not going to have enough water. If they get more landscaping, they may have to lose some lots. So we're trying to build in some flexibility here. They could give more water, I suppose, too, as a condition. So that's something that's a little bit fluid right now because we don't know where, how the town will vote on that amended plat. But it gives them the ability to move forward at this point. The other thing in the agreement, there used to be a provision that it was, basically they could develop up to about 80% of the whole subdivision, and then there's a 20% holdback. That's that security cushion that Chris and I like to have in water court, that, you know, if you're off by 5 or 10% in water court, you're fine. If you're off by 20%, you know, if we're holding back certificates, then if we're short, then you just don't let them redeem those certificates, or they have to give you more water. We changed that a little bit here because instead of being an 80-20, this first phase is going to be about 60%. Then we're going to do it. It really is pretty much still a 20%. It might be a little bit less. There's about 40 of the lots could be built in the second phase, and then we're holding back another 39 lots. And it's for the same reason. There's still the ability for the developer to pay a fee before we get to final decree to release those sooner. We set that fee high enough, we believe, to be able to go buy water, pay for infrastructure, and hold that in case we're short when we do get the decree. If by the time we get the decree we're not short, the town would give the money back. And if we're only short half of it, you'd keep half the money, give half the money back. So we also tried to change the agreement a little bit so it's more even that way in terms of payments that are truly deposits and are not needed would be given back. In the current agreement, there was a lot of things the developer wanted for certainty for their builder, and so there was a lot of risk put on the town in certain circumstances, and so you said, well, then when those payments come in, they're non-refundable. At this point, I think we've taken care of that risk factor, and so a lot of those are now returned to the developer if they're not needed. And they're pretty high fees, and they should be able to cover everything that we need. And if they're more than we need, then we would just give the money back. So I'm supportive of this amendment. I know there's some questions about the plat, the amendment of the plat, but I think that we've done a good job here. If you think that there are other ways that we should be dealing with potential shortage or other issues in here, let us know. If you have any questions about the split, if you look at the paragraphs here, you can see from the first closing and the second closing the numbers of certificates and the amount of the fees. The first closing with the 60% payment of the fees, it's $652,785. Second closing, it's $428,696 in fees. Some of those fees are to go for purchasing storage, purchasing augmentation stations, or reimbursing you for structures that you already own. And those reimbursements are funds that you can simply keep. One of those fees on the aug stations is it's more of a deposit, and if it ends up being not enough money, they'll kick in as much as another $120,000 total to get that. So we feel, again, that that's adequate to protect you. But the rest of those fees are fees that once you receive them, you get to keep them. You can put them into your water fund. You can use them to buy facilities or water rates or other things as you see appropriate. So that's all I have.
First, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
I see
boy.
your list.
Well, I'm not sure I can go for the whole thing. You know, we approved a subdivision there, and I was really happy to think at one point that as you drove down to, it was going to be housing additions and all kinds of nice stuff. But as this evolves, basically to me, we're going to end up with a swamp right off of 2 from now till eternity. You know, when you buy a piece of property, you generally go out and you walk it, check it out. At one point, they must have thought that they were going to build the entire thing because the original plot plan was for houses for the entire property. If you go over there and actually look at it, the property or the swamp is at a lower elevation than the bottom of the ditch, which, you know, it's just, you're relying on the dirt to hold back the water. Basically, the biggest problem over there is that there's not enough dirt. Years ago, on the west side, they put in pile after pile after pile to bring up that grade. Years ago, they should have done the same thing to the east side. Months ago, there was all kinds of free dirt on the other side of 2. You know, once you bring that dirt grade up, you know, you take, it's just gonna solve itself. Also, you could take that entire ditch line and you could do a French drain. I mean, there are Category 2, Category 3, Category 4 French drains. When you go to that property, you can drive down that road and you get about halfway back where they have a stake, which is their baseline point, and you can look back across and just see that that entire grade is below the bottom of that canal. I mean, honestly, it's a simple fix. But now it's going to be an undeveloped, to me, probably an eyesore. I mean, I drive 50 miles in any direction to work, and I don't know where there's a more unsightly place than what we have right out there on 2, to be honest. I don't know what's our guarantee that at some point they won't take and fill in that and turn it into a commercial pad or a multi-family pad or ask for residential again. I mean, is that a prerogative? I mean, could that actually happen? I don't know if I get that question answered. You know, and I went over all the figures, and so we're gonna have 75 houses on the west and 79 on the other, and we're gonna sell Blue Lakes the other 37, and everything adds up, you know, and my hat's off to you on the whole thing, you know, I think it's great, but I just don't understand that, you know, why it's, you know, basically I think it's just a matter of maybe economics, you know, and an easy way to say we're not gonna build, you know, on that thing. It is foresight. I mean, a problem like that in another county or something, before the county came out to look at your property, you should have changed the grade, you know, and taken care of that. And for years, they've known that it was a grading problem. I believe their lawyer yelled at me one night and said, "It's just the grade, Mr. Strock." So that's pretty much it. I really don't have anything else other than I don't see approving a water agreement until we have an amended subdivision plan for that and until we have an idea of what the swamp is going to actually look like or what. I mean, maybe it could be filled in, and maybe if they're not going to build on that for structural reasons, maybe it could be a park. Maybe it could be something that, you know, is pleasant. There are quite a few retention ponds that we have around town that look nice. You know, aside from that, maybe we need to go through our agricultural uses and rules, you know, as to what we let people do on agricultural property and just let them go. You know, because they do become a blight after a while. So that's my question. So I can't bust you on any of the numbers or any of that stuff. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
One thing I might say is that Mr. Blumenthal is here. If after you have questions for me about the agreement, if you want to ask him questions about the soil problems or other things, he is here for that reason. And I would welcome you to ask him those questions because I'm not capable of answering them.
Sure, I understand that.
Yeah, I'd like to resolve the agreement first, and then we can do that.
Anyway, so I'm to the point until I know personally, until I know what that swampland is actually going to look like, I'm not going to move forward on it. So, thank you.
Questions or comments from anyone else? I guess I just want to clarify, so what is the urgency to getting this agreement done now? Is it because they are ready to build on that western side, and so we just need to move forward, and that's why we're trying to clarify how we make all these water numbers work out?
I think that has been a little bit fluid. I think that they put out a lot of money to purchase the water rights because they thought they had a builder lined up, and then the builder left. In the meantime, they had these soils problems. Well, that's part of why the builder probably left, was they lost some of the lots over there. They have an opportunity to sell the 37 certificates to another builder here in town who would like to use them. And so there's that opportunity. I think if they can get this water agreement amended, they have the ability maybe to work with other builders to show them what they have and that they can negotiate in a better position with them on the west side and perhaps on the east side, but probably mostly on the west side. So, you know, from my standpoint, there's no urgency. I think from the developer standpoint, I think those are the issues. But again, Mr. Blumenthal is here if you'd like to ask him those questions. Well, I think so. But my plan was to come back to you at your next board meeting as an action item. We'd only bring the clean version then. And so I'll look this over in the interim and see if there's any mistakes or things that we have in there. And then we would propose to bring that back if that's what you would like. And if Steve tells us that you wanted to come back, then we would come back at that next meeting to have further
Not
discussion.
seeing
and
any
action.
opposition to that. I suppose there might be opposition to the actual resolution.
Sure. Right, okay, thank you.
And then, since we are on the topic, as long as that's okay, I will invite Mr. Blumenthal if he wants to give us an update on that part, since trustee Strack clearly has questions, so.
Good evening, Mike Blumenthal. I'm the managing member of Lob LLC, the owner of that property. And I think some councilman, board of trustees, Larry brought up some good issues. As to the timing of the purchase of the water certificates, we had suggested actually that all we are able to sell now is 37 to the LGI folks. And the balance of the 134, which is I think 97 in phase one, we're happy to defer that until the replat and the landscaping plans are all approved. And I think we had a little disagreement on that, but that was my preference, and our esteemed counselor wasn't in favor of that, but if you'd like to reconsider that, I'm all for it. We really don't need to buy the certificates until our final plat and landscaping is approved. You know, there's no point for us to pay for certificates that can't be used because the plat's not done yet. So I'm okay with your proposal. Then I wanted to touch a little bit on, to try to address some of your concerns and comments. We purchased a property or got involved in a property, I think back 2007, and that property was very dry. There was no real problem with it that we could see during our due diligence inspection process. And in 2015, there was a monsoon, if you remember, and that's when the first time we heard about the water ponding there and flooding. And engineers and soils test people, and environmental people, and the Corps of Engineers, everybody studied it and looked at it, and it was determined that Berkshire, the developer KB Homes, had actually dammed up the right where their fence is on those two homes that are at the low southeast area, and caused the water not to be able to drain and pond. And we sued them. We filed a lawsuit against KB Homes to fix the problem. And guess what happened? You're not going to believe this. Our case was kicked out because their brilliant lawyer made a case that this falls under the builder defect law. And sure, they screwed up. They made a mistake with their drainage plan. But because it falls under a builder defect law, 6 years had come and go, and the law expired, you know, I can't remember the term right now. And we got thrown out of court for that. Can you believe that? They admitted they did it. So now we're back to, you know, fixing the problem on our own, and which we will. And what else exacerbated the problem was now the Spear Canal is leaking and causing, you know, exacerbating the problem. So that's one reason we had to delete 37 lots, because the water table was so high. In order to mitigate that problem and stabilize those lots, it was like $25,000 a lot to remove
the dirt, to put one layer of granites, big rocks, and then another geotech material, and then small lots and compacted. You know, it just busted the numbers. So we have deleted those lots with the replat, and we're working on making sure that area is dry and well landscaped and an asset to the community, not an eyesore. So with that in mind, just thinking ahead here, I thought I might just highlight some of the details of what we're going to do. And have you can talk about it in a minute if you like. The items in red are the items that the engineer has come up with to mitigate the problem. And it has been included in the replat. It has been sent to Steve Stanley and subsequently to the new engineers and the new landscape people. And we're waiting for comments back on the plan. And if it's acceptable the way it is, fine. If they have comments that need tweaking, we're gonna fix, our engineers and our landscape people are gonna fix the problem to make sure that that area is gonna remain dry, well drained, well landscaped, and even a bird observatory gazebo area.
You know, I might add an elevation to this, you know, so a cross section.
Well, that's in the big sets of plans that were submitted to the town. I didn't want to bring those and copy them for everybody, but they're available for your viewing pleasure. Just contact Steve.
Well, yeah, I mean, it looks like you're just, so let me ask you this, what's to keep you from drying this area up and then turning it into commercial or something else?
Well, that would be a rezoning issue that you would have to approve. So that's impossible, basically. And if you can't build homes on a crawl space area, you're not going to be able to build, you know, structured commercial buildings.
I really don't want to argue with your engineers, but I've built multi-million-dollar houses with 18-inch groundwater. It's not that difficult. You know, once you put in the proper gravel, you take the soil's ability to whip water up anymore. After that, I put a full basement in the 4-foot area. So it can be done, and it's not that difficult, so.
Well, we had the engineers and the development people at Horton. We had our engineers look at it, A.G. Wassenauer, CTL Thompson, and they're not buildable without spending a lot of money to stabilize that site. And our builders didn't want it, and we weren't going to do it. We thought the best solution was to turn it into a nice open space, a bird observatory, well landscaped, dried out, with a drainage pan, and then storm pipes going down to the southeast corner underneath the Well County Road 2. And it's going to turn into a lovely area once given the time to fix it.
If you do all that, then I'd be for it.
What?
I said, if you do all that you say you're gonna do, and clean that up, you know, then I'd certainly be for it.
Well, I think Mr. Stamey's going to enforce that and make sure we do. So you're in good hands.
All right, I wondered about that.
Trustee Jeffrey?
So you can't see any of the landscaping you spoke about on this document, but I assume when the replatting proposal comes to us, that will all be available for us to see.
Landscape plan has been completed along with the replat, and it has been submitted to the town, and I believe it's been sent out to your landscaping consultant and your engineering consultant. We're waiting for comments ourselves, and as soon as we get them, we will respond to those comments and proceed to fix whatever they believe needs to be taken care of. Any questions or, good? Okay, thank you.
Next item is action items, and the only thing we have is
Just real, I had one other quick thing for Steve before you left. Is there a way we could get like a 30 by 42 map of our water system? Like, I've seen a map with, our well sites. I've seen a map of, I think there's a pipeline that comes across from, yep. And, so then you also showed us these tonight. Is there a way that we could kind of get like Lock Buoy's water system on just a 30 by 42 where we can see where United Reservoir is and we see all of those kind of networks? And I think it'd be kind of nice to see all of these things together in one format rather than having everything kind of pieced. And I know that's a big format. I'm actually just looking for a PDF. So I don't want to bring in a 30 by 42 sheet.
Chris Sanchez has all of those maps on his computer. And so I think if you talk to him or Steve or I talk to him, you can ask him to put together something like that. I mean, a lot of times, we bring in these 8.5 by 11s or, legal size, which are not easy to read. So I can see if we can get you something like that.
Thanks.
Next item is the action items, and it's the Fall Fest discussion. And I think I'm leading this with some input from Steve and Linda probably. Steve, Linda, and I, and Maureen met this afternoon to discuss what we do with the Fall Fest. I don't know where the board is in knowing everything that's been going on, but since our last meeting, the chamber has decided they are not willing to host the event. They were only willing to give very minimal support in terms of volunteers potentially showing up to help us. As a result, the committee, the events committee, the former events committee, and town staff were kind of left in the lurch as to what do we do now. And so we had some discussions this afternoon. What Steve and Linda have indicated, and what I agree with, is that we just don't have the staff resources to put this all on ourselves. And we are straining our volunteers by expecting 2 or 3 people to do it all themselves. So the concept that we came up with was perhaps for this year, we scale it down, do a fireworks show at dusk with some food trucks in the afternoon that people can come in and mill around in the park and maybe have some very basic activities, and then have the fireworks show at night. I ran that by the former events committee. They pretty much said, yes, let's do that. This is too much for us to take on at this point. That is what I heard from Mae Westcott, who's spoken to us very eloquently in the past. That's what I heard from Amber, who has also been hyper involved in this. And I think Don's nodding suggests that's what she's heard as well. So I guess I'm kind of looking for the board's position on, is that the route we want to go this year, with an expectation that at budget time we talk about fixing this all? How do we make this happen next year? In terms of how much money do we allocate, and do we get an events planner to make sure this actually happens the way we expected in 2020? But for now, what do we do for 2019, and is the board okay with what I suggested, the scaled down fireworks event? So I'll take questions and comments. Trustee Doherty?
I guess I just have one question. I mean, did we really drive that it was the scale that we were planning to begin with? Like, I guess I don't recall, like, I guess I'm confused because I don't remember dictating that the scale was what it was. So I don't have any reservations to scale it back because I don't really recall saying that the scale that they were looking at was what we wanted or needed, because I definitely understand that it needs to be manageable, but if they need to scale it back to make it manageable, I absolutely think we should do that. I'm just confused because I don't think we dictated that.
I don't think they were interpreting it as us dictating it. I think they were trying to set the goal at being what it had been in the past.
That's right. Okay.
Trustee Scott?
At the very beginning, I kind of wondered why they were going for such a grand event. At first I almost expected just a little get together in this park, kind of like the ice cream socials, that they would just put on some small events, maybe a movie, maybe a concert, just something in the parks, just to bring the people out, So I was really surprised to see that they were just gonna tackle the Fall Fest right off the bat, with beer and fireworks and everything. So, you know, I would like to see, if they want to still do the festival, I'd like to see that. I would like to, I would hope that maybe, the Lions Club would still like to put on a breakfast. If they want to do a breakfast, and whether they want to do a breakfast or not, I can still put on a run on that day to help out, so.
Trustee Doherty?
I think they should do what they're capable of doing. It's, if they're able to get a run together, then absolutely let's have a run. But if you guys can't get all the pieces together in time to have a run, then let's not have a run. I mean, I don't think we want to overburden them. Again, I don't think we should be really dictating what the scope of this needs to look like for this year. They need to scale it back and they're not able to make certain things happen this year for one reason or another. I don't think we should be overly limiting on what our expectations are.
Trustee Morris?
Yeah, agreed. We delegated to them some responsibility, and it's a huge opportunity, and I think modifying it to fit the committee's constraints and make it so that what we do is reasonable and practical for what can be done, I think it is just logical to do that. I do want to make sure that we are supporting the committee and empowering them so that they don't lose interest in doing this. I can't imagine the work that they're doing. I am aware that it is a tremendous amount of work that the committee's doing. I don't want them to lose interest or get burned out, so modifying it and making it doable, however that looks, is the right way to go.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly respond to that. I did reach out to, after our meeting this afternoon, I reached out to May and Amber, and both of them expressed to me that they were okay with this resolution, with having staff take over a very scaled-down event with their input and help. But they both said they're very interested in continuing in the future, and that they viewed this year as a learning experience as to what is too much and what is not enough, but they're both very interested in continuing.
The scaled down event. So I just want to make sure you understand that while you still have a group of really dedicated women that are willing to help as volunteers, it's really come back on the town for this event.
Anything else? So,
I was just wondering, do we have the town staff to do that?
that is the concern. That's what the meeting this afternoon was about, was all of a sudden this came back on town staff to plan. We just don't have, without asking people to work overtime, we don't have the staff to plan and host the Fall Fest with 8 weeks notice.
Even a minimal one then, or cutting back?
The scale down, I think yes, at least what I heard from staff is that we think we can get the fireworks and some food trucks lined up.
Okay.
So I guess the action that we're looking for then is to send the donation to the chamber, and some general direction to staff to plan the scaled down event and make it happen. Do I have that motion?
I move to rescind the donation to the chamber and give two separate ones.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion and a second, roll call please.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Jock.
Yes.
Trustee Ott. Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Trustee Morris.
Yes.
Mayor Lofgren.
Yes.
Trustee Counterman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Second motion.
I will move that we direct the town employees to put on a scaled version of a fall festival to what they feel is manageable in their duties without having to work a lot of extra time. Yeah, that's too early. In an amount not to exceed $10,000.
Second.
Motion and second, roll call please.
Trustee Morris.
Yes.
Mayor Lofgren.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Ott.
Can I amend that motion?
Not now.
Now, okay.
Oh.
Trustee Strong.
Yes.
Trustee Counterman.
Yes.
Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Thanks.
Staff direction to use volunteers to augment their help, to help
Oh, Yeah,
them.
I don't think we need a
Don't
motion for
do
that.
that, okay.
Yeah, and staff has indicated, and several of the events committee people have indicated they're interested in continuing to.
Okay, as
to
long as
help.
we don't need.
The what committee? 'Cause I don't think we have that, right? Oh, the thing that we just did 2 weeks ago. Do we need to reverse that? Or are we just going as volunteers?
Volunteers. Okay, next item on the agenda is staff comments. Mr. Steen.
Just a couple of brief updates, Mayor. So I have, I was going to make copies, but, so I have a map of County Road 2, and the Phase 1 is the cross-hatched area in the red. Phase 1B is the intersections on that in the crosshatch red, and Phase 2 is the center section of the road. So they're scheduled now, they're anticipating to start doing curb and gutter on Phase 1 the first week in September. And then the paving would occur toward the last part of September, September 12 to 19. That's 1A, then 1B, they'll come back into the intersections. So you'll start seeing some pretty significant change there starting in September. So on the roundabout project, we did open the bids. Unfortunately, we received only one bid. That bid was about 35% higher than our engineer's estimate. So we're going to reschedule that and re-advertise this fall and look for a project date that would start after the first of the year. I think that's the only way we can put this back together. Talking to contractors, their dance card was full. They were finishing up jobs for the rest of the year and weren't in a position to take on a new job starting in August. So I think that's our best alternative right now. We did have our water planning team did meet with our Lake Henry engineer designer. And we had a really good discussion with him on options for both the report format and then the primary options of 1, 2, and 3 for the board to review of size and cost and scale of a Lake Henry restoration. And again, this would include, long-term goal is that we would have an area probably on now the south end of that Lake Henry, in the area where the old lagoons were. That would be kind of the community park area in terms of targeting that location. Primarily because the shape of the dam reservoir we looked at before was a long and rectangular kind of shape. And just to do any kind of slurry walls and to build a reservoir, it increased the cost significantly. So by keeping it more compact, going down for the volume is more cost effective. So that's what we're working on right now. And Steve Jeffers and Chris Sanchez were in this meeting along with our engineer.
Is that something we're looking at for a 2020 project or later out?
We'll probably look, based on cost, that may be a 2020 consideration for our budget. And hope to have some preliminary cost estimates back in September or October while we're doing our budget work for water. And as mentioned earlier, we will probably start the water tank construction over 2 budget years, 2020 and 2021. We have a host of projects are going to be starting. We're probably going to finish up or start the design for our I-76 signalization project. We'll probably start the design for the trail project.
Questions or comments for Steve?
You just mentioned I-76.
The program, I think, was, and I need to pull out my material first, but I think it was a design in '21 and construction in 2022.
Anyone else? Any other staff updates? Staff? Seeing none, we'll move to Mayor Trustee comments. Trustee Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everybody the Southeast Weld County Fair is this weekend. They have a parade on Saturday. It's short and sweet, usually has a really good turnout, so I invite you all to come to that. The parade starts at 8:30.
I'll actually interrupt you and say we are going to be walking in that. So can I get a quick show of hands? There Saturday? Where?
Keensburg, Main Street.
Yeah. No. There you go. You can.
I'll be there.
That's 7 is when you have to register.
I think so.
Same thing, just stand there
Well, we're gonna have a public works truck. So 7 a.m. Main Street.
Will we have some candy we can throw? I would love to see that.
Do they allow candy to be thrown?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do, they try to block you.
They have bazooka bubblegum shooters off the fire trucks. It's really cool. Yeah, bring your kids. Our HOA, I just noticed in front of Bella Vista, right along 37, both to the south side of the farmhouse and then right along the front, the HOA only maintains a certain portion of the grass out there in front, and there's quite a few weeds and tall grass. And the HOA management company indicated that that was the town's responsibility. And I just wanted to point out that it needs some responsibility. And if it's not the town's, let me know so that I can bug the HOA to take care of it. I can talk with you more privately about it. We have a community member who is going to be traveling to Scotland later this fall, and she is actually going to go to Loch Buoy, Scotland. And she, Officer Zach Johnson is her husband, and he spoke with me about it and thought it might be a good idea for us to send some sort of a formal communication from the mayor and the board with her they're putting together like a whole little care package. So I would love to see us do something fun like that. I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware, we did lose a student in a tragic car accident yesterday morning, and 2 other students that are still in the hospital recovering, and just ask that you keep their families in your thoughts as we're moving forward. It's a really tough way to start a school year. And on that same note, as we get ready for Fall Festival, Linda, Debbie, reach out to me, and I could probably find some student groups that would be interested in helping with that event. And I'm happy to help drum up that support. That's all I have. Thank you.
I just have one thing on County Road 2. I'd be interested to see if maybe it's okay to have JBA come back out and discuss a couple of things with County Road 2. As things are progressing on it, I have a couple of concerns with how things are going. Primarily with the relation of the road to some of the residents. So when this was discussed early on, and maybe it's just that I'm misremembering, but I remember that throughout Berkshire, that it would be the road edge would be about 25 feet away from from the fence line. And also in some of the drawings that we were presented, it looked like the road was barely shifting towards Berkshire at all. And if you go and look at where they're grading, and you go and look at where the concrete pan is, there's one kind of on each end for where the drains are going to, where the drains are now installed, and kind of look down that line. It's significantly closer to Berkshire than was, at least in my mind, led to believe. And that's not to say that this wasn't the right way to go. But honestly, it's a little frustrating that I don't think we had that information. I think we asked multiple times for, like, give us a real dimension, cut a section and show where, the fence line was and where the sidewalk was and where the road was. And we never got that from them. And I guess my biggest frustration is, and it's not even that my property is right there. Because again, I think from my seat here, I think it's a benefit to the town to have this improvement on that. And I really don't have a huge concern about my property specifically. My concern is, as a trustee, that I relayed information to my neighbors and to other people of the town about where that road was in relation to that development that's wrong, that I misrelayed to citizens of this town. And that's frustrating. That's what frustrates me about that. Not that it's the sidewalk is basically on my back fence. I don't actually have a huge issue with that. But I'm pretty sure a lot of my neighbors do. And that's not what was relayed to us by JVA. And that's not what I then relayed on to the fellow citizens. And that's really frustrating for me. That's really irritating to me. Because honestly, that basically means that I lied to our citizens. And I'm the one accountable for that, not JVA. I guess in some long term, they are somewhat accountable as well. But I would like to have them come and discuss this a little bit further and really make sure that of where this is and where that was supposed to be. Maybe it's being built wrong. I doubt it. But that's definitely a frustration that I have that I would like to have further discussions with JVA on. Maybe it's just discussion for discussion's sake, so maybe it's pointless. But I first off wanted to voice my frustration, and secondly, I guess maybe extend my apologies to the citizens that I talked to that relayed misinformation, because that's not what I was led to believe by the people we hired to give us correct information and I guess good direction on where things were going. So that's all that I have.
Nothing.
I had a couple of things. Okay, so the first one I have is the parade reminder. For those of you interested, it will be August 10th, which is this Saturday. Meet at 7 a.m. at the Keensburg Clinic on Main Street. That is the Southeast Will County Fair Parade. It starts at 8:30, but we're supposed to meet at 7. Another thing for your calendars, board retreat.
cream social same day.
Yes, the ice cream social is the same day. Yes.
And the Oasis.
And the Oasis. Board retreat, so everyone write this down, September 10th, which is a Tuesday night. It's one of our off Tuesdays at 5:30 PM. We will have dinner served. Anticipate about 3 hours or so,
What time?
5:30. So early show. And then yes, also on August 10th, we have the 2 socials, 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And the Oasis night at 6:30 PM.
What was that again now?
Which one?
September 10th, we have a board retreat
Yes,
at 5:30, and then you said something else and you lost me.
yes. Ice cream socials, August 10th.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, and the Oasis night. And I would love it if as many of the board members can be at all of those events as possible. Particularly Oasis night, since it is a first experiment, it'd be great if we could all be there to meet people as they come in. And maybe hand out any leftover ice cream that we have if they show up.
They won't have concessions open,
There's no concessions, but you can bring the food.
You can or can't bring
You
food.
can. I think that's all that I have. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned at 8:07 PM.
Thank you.